that tractor beam out of commission, or this is going to be a real short trip. Okay, hit
it! Hello, everyone. How's it going?
How's it going?
So, we all got up at different times today, right? We have all over the globe right now.
Mm-hmm.
We have a very special guest, John Goodson, ILM Model Maker and digital artist. And can't tell you how happy we are to have you on here, John. It's very special to all of us.
Happy to be here. I'm so sorry about the time differences.
No, it's kind of fun, actually.
Doesn't matter.
So you're in California, right?
Yeah.
9 p.m. Jason and I are on the East Coast. We're at midnight. And John's the only one we got to say sorry to. He got up at 5 a.m. So, yeah. But he likes the punishment anyway, so it's okay.
Oh, yeah.
But like I said, we're really, really, really happy that you joined us today. I mean, basically, you know, we follow a lot of your career, and we marvel at all the things that you've designed and built for ILM and all the movies and shows and stuff. And you have the job we all wish we had. So, well, why don't I let you just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe, you know, how you started and maybe a few I'm sure a lot of our viewers know who you are, but if they don't, you know, there's going to be time to tell you who you are.
Yeah. Well, I started at ILM in August of '88. And when I was a kid, I was living on an Air Force base. Next door neighbor was a fighter pilot. And when I was like 5, he got me watching Star Trek. And then shortly thereafter, somebody gave me the Making a Star Trek book. And it clearly showed none of this stuff is real. Those are models, props, sets, you know. But I was totally fascinated with it. I'm 5 years old. And prior to that, there had been an episode of Lost in Space when I was 3. It was called The Derelict. And it really featured the Jupiter 2 up close. And I thought that was absolutely amazing. And that's a funny thing because theoretically, there was a 10-foot miniature of the Jupiter 2, which was the flying saucer that the Robinson family was lost in. And supposedly, those shots were the 10-foot miniature. And you flash forward to about 5 years ago, and Gary Kerr, a friend of mine, tracked that thing down, and the 10-foot does exist, and I got to go see it. So it's really fascinating to see something at age 3, and then, you know, 55 years later, go out and actually get to see the thing. It was amazing.
That is cool, yeah.
You know, but so I was fascinated with the stuff, and then I was at a grocery store when I was 13, and issue 7 of Starlog Magazine was on the magazine shelf, and it had Space 1999 on the cover. Well, it had Star Wars on the cover, but it had an article about Space 1999, and it showed the Eagles, the ships that were on the show. And I begged my grandmother to buy me this issue because there wasn't much out there in terms of behind-the-scenes content. You know, there were no DVD extras, there's no internet. So this showed, you know, Brian Johnson and Nick Alder holding the different size Eagle models. And I was like, this was gold. So I begged her to buy me the magazine. She did. And there was an article in there about this Star Wars thing. I didn't know what it was, but it looked pretty interesting. So I was there opening day, and I saw it 31 times in the theater the first night. Wow. So I was there like every week, you know, and I was absolutely fascinated. I started writing letters to ILM going, hey, I want to come and work for you guys. I'm 14. I want to come and work for you guys, you know, and they write me back and say, thank you so much for your inquiry. Your letter's on file. Please don't write us anymore, you know, but that was where I wanted to go. And the art of books had little bios in the back of them for a lot of the people that were on the crew. And it looked like a lot of people were industrial design or they were architecture. So I went to NC State in product design, which is close I get to industrial design, and hoped somehow this would all work out. And I came out to visit a friend of mine I went to high school with, a guy named Tony Hudson. Tony had gotten a job in the creature shop. He was working there. So I came out and spent 5 weeks sleeping on his couch, and they were doing Star Trek 4 and just starting on Inner Space, and Howard the Duck had just wrapped. So I was around ILM for that 5 weeks and got to see a lot of stuff and meet a lot of people. I got an hour interview with Steve Golly, Warren Peterson, Izo Young, Charlie Bailey, and Greg Jean. And Greg was working on Batteries Not Included. And Greg's like, so what's going on? I'm like, well, I got a year left in school, but I want to do this. He goes, go back and finish school. This is going to be a year. So that was good advice. I went back and finished school. And I came out a year later and hoping I'd get a job, and interviewed with a couple of industrial design places down in Menlo Park. But 6 days after I got here, I got a call to come to ILM for a week. And so I got there, and the guy who hired me was Larry Tan, and they were doing Body Wars, which was like Star Tours, but you get miniaturized and put inside the human body. Okay. And so I was supposed to do a week on Body Wars. So I sat at the front lobby, I sat at the couch out there, and Larry said, well, they'll come, Steve Golly will come by and he'll get you, or Jeff Mann. And I had met Jeff when I was out there in 86, and nobody came. And I sat there and finally got to be lunchtime, and people are leaving and stuff. And Larry goes walking by, he goes, did nobody come and get you? I was like, no. I said, I've been sitting here all morning. And he goes, well, come with me. So I follow him, and we go down the hall to the wood shop. And as we're walking there, he goes, I'm giving you to Steve Golly. And just so you know, he hates rookies. And I'm like, well, great. So he just takes me to the shop and hands me off to Steve. And Steve, all Steve did is he handed me this drawing. He goes, build this. And then everybody left. And I'm standing in the wood shop. I don't know where the bathroom is. I don't know where the front door is. I don't know if actually I'm working there. I don't know what's going on. So I went out in the hall, and I saw Dennis Mirren, who I recognized from the Star Wars making of stuff. And I saw him. I'm like, hey, can you take me to the model shop? He's like, oh yeah. So he takes me upstairs, and I go in the model shop, and there was Bill George was in there. That was the only person in there. And I came in and I said, I'm supposed to make something. And he said, well, you can use that desk over there. So for 3 days, I tried to be as invisible as I could, because I thought, well, when they figure out I'm in here, they're going to throw me out, And on day 3, I was out in the hall, and I ran into Jeff Mann. He goes, hey, was I supposed to come talk to you? I was like, yeah, do I work here? And he goes, oh, yeah, you're working here. Like, okay. So I did not know. But for 3 days, I'm like, I'm gonna be invisible. I'm gonna stay here as long as I can before they throw me out. So that was how I got started.
I'm sure it's not that easy these days.
It's so different now. It's such a different. Oh yeah. I mean, we didn't have locks on the doors, and it was they had taken over an industrial park in Santa Fe, and bit by bit they took over the real estate as other companies left. But they would leave up the signage for those companies. So people thought there was a machine shop, and there was a famous Amos Cookies place, and all these things that weren't there anymore. So, people would randomly walk in off the street, they wouldn't know what it was. Be really puzzled by the whole thing. So, yeah, it's a very different animal now.
Did you build models before you started working for ILM on your own?
I started building models in 1969.
Okay.
So it was a while back. That was the first stuff I was messing around with. I was like 5. Put together this kid that lived down the street from us had an airplane model. He took it, he smashed it with a cinder block, and I collected all the pieces and tried to glue it back together again. That was my first model. It was this kludge pile of wreckage, But
that's a first kit bash.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's funny was two of the other kits I got early on were these large scale Aurora model kits of airplanes, and one was a P-40 and one was the Fokker trimotor. Those are what the Red Baron flew, had the 3 wings. And these things seemed really big. They went together with screws. And I thought, God, they were huge. And I've still got the box art for the P-40 from that original kit. And about 5 years ago, I kept looking at them on eBay. I'm like, I keep wanting to buy one of these just to have it for old time's sake. And finally one showed up and it was missing a wheel and a radio aerial or something. It was like $60. I was like, I'll buy it. So I buy it. I don't know, a week later, I come home and there's this little box, about 10, 12 inches wide across, sitting outside the door. I'm like, what is that? Open it up, it was that plane. But this is a story about relative scale. When I had that as a kid, I was a lot smaller, so it seemed huge. But it was really stunning to pull it out, and it's like this big.
So. Fantastic.
Well, yeah, we all 3 of us, we love to build models. I mean, I just recently started maybe 2 years ago, and John's been doing it for a lot longer than all of us put together. Well, maybe not you, but when I was a kid, I don't know, you're a little bit older than I am, but I never really paid attention to people behind the scenes who made these movies, so for you to see, recognize some of these people in the background other than Carrie Fisher and all that, it's pretty, cool that I never would have thought of that.
Yeah, but it's funny. There were a lot of those making of Star Wars things that came out after the first film was so successful. Yeah. And they would show, the behind the scenes. They'd show the models in front of the blue screen, or they'd show them pulling the camera back while a TIE fighter blew up. So there was exposure to that stuff. So they were definitely featuring it, because I think people saw special effects in a whole different way with Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
And, 2001 predated it by 10 years, more or less. And the effects in that are still incredible. But, you contrast 2001 with, in the same year, I think the Green Slime came out. And it's the most horrendous looking stuff. I mean, you just can't even imagine. Anybody thought this was acceptable, but, this is the same year.
Right.
So when Star Wars came out, I think it kind of shone a different light on special effects, and it became kind of a star unto itself.
Right. What do you what do you prefer? Are you a bigger Star Trek fan or Star Wars fan, or something other than that?
They paid exactly the same.
Okay, yeah.
Not to sound totally mercenary, but I like them both, but for really different reasons. And I really enjoyed Star Trek. I was model supervisor on Generations and First Contact.
Okay.
And we built the last practical Enterprise. We built a 10-foot Enterprise E, which was kind of a nightmare, but and on Star Wars, I worked on the special edition for New Hope, the special edition for Return of the Jedi. And then I was on all three of the prequels. Then I was on Solo. I was on Rogue One. I was on Episode 7. I was on Episode 9. Then I've been on Ahsoka and Mandalorian and Skeleton Crew. So I've been on a lot of Star Wars.
Skeleton Crew. That is
Skeleton Crew sounds exciting.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what it turns out like. I really like the ship. Can't say a whole lot more about it, but I really like the ship.
Did you build it?
I did.
Okay, you can answer that.
These models that we've been doing for the TV shows, I build those with a guy named Dan Petrascu. And Dan's a machinist and a model maker. So it's the two of us doing it, which is kind of amazing because, I remember we used to have several thousand square feet and departments of people that did different jobs, and now it's just me and him. So, yeah.
Well, it's wonderful for us to see that physical models are still being made. It's so nice from Mandalorian and Ahsoka and now Skeleton Crew and going right back to all these models, and it seems to be you making these fantastic models that we're all falling in love with again. It's so good to see.
Well, I feel really lucky to be doing it, and really lucky that we are doing it. It's definitely a callback to the old days because we're building miniatures with shooting and motion control. And John Knoll's building the motion control systems in his garage. So Dan, myself, and John jokingly refer to ourselves as 3 garage productions.
Yeah,
to see John's motion control rig that he made for Mandalorian for the Razor Crest. For that one shot of it swooping past, and I'm sure many others. It was worth the hard work because it looks absolutely beautiful on screen.
Well, he absolutely loves building that stuff, and I think he's on at least like generation 4 at this point. And so every season, he's got a whole new system. And like this one's got spinning LEDs, and it looks like something out of the 60s, and, but he loves doing that. So yeah.
When we saw that, I was at Anaheim, Celebration Anaheim, and I saw that model there. Was that the one you made? That was the one that was at Anaheim, or is there a second one that they had there?
No, that's it. That was the Razor Crest. So Dan and I built the Razor Crest, the Ahsoka ship, and the light cruiser. And then they had an N1 starfighter that was 3D printed by Gentle Giant out of metal. That was a gift for John Favreau.
That I remember. But they also had the Ahsoka ship at Anaheim. Yeah.
And nobody knew what it was.
Oh, I knew what it was.
I stood there. I stood there for every day of that event watching the models. And like once or twice a day, I'd see somebody go, "Oh, it's Ahsoka." I thought, "Oh my God, I wish I had a gold star to go give that guy." Because everybody's walking by it. They don't know what it is.
Yeah, so. I saw it. I fell in love with it immediately. I was blown away by it. I seen it. It was in the cartoon too. Like a quick shot of it was in the cartoon. Yeah. In fact, I have a picture of that I was going to show. But I came home with a whole bunch of pictures and was talking to everybody about it. And I'm like, I got to build one of these. I'd say, John, we talked about it quite a bit.
It although it was wildly different to anything from sort of the OT or the original trilogy, it just seemed so familiar, and it just blew our minds. We were like, we got to build that.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I mean, it was funny because we had finished up the light cruiser, and I was talking to Dave Filoni, and I said, if you want to build that ship you're talking about, now's a good time. And he sent me artwork, and as soon as he sent me the artwork, I'm like, I've already built this before, and it was on Attack of the Clones. And it was a concept model that was the same thing. It was the big wing, and it had 3 engines on the back, and the cockpit was built into it. So it didn't have the rotating wing. It didn't have the fuselage, the bulges on the side, except at the back it had the 3 engines. So it was that design, and then he took that and incorporated some other details and made it like the T6. But it was funny when he sent me that. I'm like, I kind of built this thing before. It's like, like a foot tall, but I was familiar with the basic concept of it. So we extrapolated from there.
Yeah. Did you? Okay. Everybody was saying they had like a question or two they wanted to ask you. My one question is, did you use kit parts on this, or was it mostly 3D printed Greeblies?
There's a handful of kit parts on it, and most of it's just handmade.
Okay.
The backs of the engines are 3D prints, and the ball turret is 3D printed, and there are 2 little round details on the sides, and I think that's all the 3D printing there is. Okay. And it's kind of problematic because, when I took it down to Celebration, I was mounting it on that rig, so it's tail mounted. Those 3D print parts are so delicate, and it was breaking while I was trying to mount it. And I was kind of grumbling, going, "Oh God, I don't want any more 3D printed parts." And so when we took it to shoot it on stage, that wing mechanism is really complicated, and it couldn't be. It'd be really simple if you could put a motor right in the center of the ship, but you couldn't because there's a rod mount there. So the motor's eccentric, and so Dan had to design and engineer an eccentric motor with a gear system out there and the electrical contacts and all that stuff, because there's power in the wings. And so when it came time to shoot it, I'm like, I want you to be there. And not only did the wings rotate, but the upper and lower fuselage sections contracted down. When the wing would rotate, they would contract down. And when it would go back vertical, they'd come back out. Well, we didn't know that. They give us renders of a digital model that we work from, and they're 1-to-1. So they give us the printouts. That's what we build. And we've probably been working on it a couple months, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, the dimensions are different over here from this. And I'm looking at what is going on. And I called Dan. I said, have you looked at this? Have you noticed this? He goes, I don't know what you're talking about. And I said, pull up this drawing and pull up this drawing. And he was like, what the hell's going on? I said, I don't know. And I said, maybe I missed something in the meetings, and I hope not, but I don't know what's going on. So I called the art department and I said, hey, just curious about this detail. And they're like, we don't know what that is. I'm like, oh, thank God. So they went up talking to, I don't know if they talked to Filoni or if they talked to Rene Garcia, but the word came back, oh yeah, this is something Dave incorporated because he wanted the ship to be more svelte when it landed. I'm like, okay. But then Dan had to come up with a secondary mechanism that worked at the same time to do that. So he had a lot going on this. Dan was really busy designing all this.
It looks huge. I mean, should you try and keep to about 1/24 scale? Or?
Well, like most TV show spaceships, there is no way in hell to fit the interior into that ship that they show on TV. And it's funny because the seats in the cockpit, the seats were in the digital model. So we're like, well, that's how big we'll build them. We built them, and then I'm watching the show, and they show that big room that she's standing in. I'm like, please tell me that's not inside the ship. And then it's inside the ship. I'm like, you can't even stand up back there. And you look at that ball turret. That ball turret is really tiny. It's probably like 28 inches in diameter, So there's a lot of, but we were early on with the miniature. We were way ahead of production at that point. So that's one of those things that happens.
Well, I really loved the design of it when I first saw it, and even after that. But then, like, it's almost like the Millennium Falcon from the original trilogy. So I feel that's where a lot of Star Wars movies and shows miss out on, is they don't have they had the Razor Crest and now it's gone. They have Ahsoka has this ship that is part of the show. Really, it's like it's like the Millennium Falcon. Yeah, it's a character in itself, and it's a main environment that everybody's familiar with and keeps coming back to. And I think that's where this actually works very well, and makes the Ahsoka show even better. Is this ship?
It's funny.
Yeah, I don't want it destroyed like the Razor Crest.
Yeah, let's not.
Well, it's funny. So, I was down in Manhattan Beach, and because we had the VES awards, and the Razor Crest got nominated for Best Miniature, and we won, which was a real surprise, but we won it. And everybody's like, you got to come over to the studio, and see the setup. And I'm like, well, tomorrow's the day because I'm here. So we went over there. And while I'm there, I find out they're going to destroy the Razor Crest. And I was like, what? And so I go and I talk to Filoni, and I said, on Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry was a B-17 captain in World War II. And that same 10-person crew got in that B-17 every time they went out. So that B-17 became a part of the crew. And that's the function the Enterprise served on Star Trek, was it was a part of the crew. And here, I said, but when they made Star Trek 3, Harv Bennett was producing that. Harv flew Hueys in Vietnam. You didn't fly the same Huey. You got in whatever was available. You didn't develop a sentimental attachment to a particular one. So I think Harv Bennett found it easy to destroy the Enterprise in Star Trek 3. And I said, you're going down the same path. You're killing one of the main characters here. I said, I think you're making a mistake. And he goes, it's too late. We're doing it. And I'm like, okay. You know what? But I got all this email from people, tell me it's not true. I'm like, well, apparently it's true. I saw the episode 2. It blew up.
I keep hoping they're going to bring it back in an upcoming season or something. That it's just
bring it back. He keeps it in a jar by the door.
Pieces, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good segue, John. Do you grow attachment to these models, or have you worked for ILM for so long that you realise that it's not part of? It's just something that just is used for the show, and then you move on to the next.
No, it's so funny because I tell people they're kind of like children in a way, that you're always attached to them. And so much of the time, these things come back over and over and over again. So you never really get rid of them because they want to do something with it, or it needs to be repaired or something. So you keep revisiting them. And, frankly, when these are done, I'm really glad when they leave the house, and they're not in the house anymore. They're gone. That's
kind of like your kids.
Yeah, it's kind of the same kind of thing, but so it's just it's a relief when they finally leave. But yeah, I think I'm attached to all of them. I don't think there's anything. I don't know. Little piece of, every time you build something, there's a piece of you in it, kind of.
Yeah, quite literally when you cut yourself with the hobby knife.
Well, there's the sacrifice to the gods. There's got to be a little bit of blood. Yeah. The last 2 jobs I've done up here, I put a 3/8" drill through the side of my thumb and burned the insides of both these hands on 2 different jobs. I'm like, well, there's the sacrifice there.
Yeah.
So I haven't quite given up on the hands yet.
Every single model I've ever done has a little bit of my finger's skin peeled off in some sort of. There's a little bit of me in every time.
I couldn't get fingerprinted by the police because the skin on my thumbs are on the models on the super glue.
Yeah.
John, what paints are your preferred paints to use? Do you stick to one particular brand, or do you go back and try and use equivalent of what they used in the 70s with Floquil? Or
well, it's funny. I still got a lot of Floquil, and I still use that, but very hard to get. I think it's been out of production for at least 15 years. But it was such good paint. But these days, for all the stuff we've been doing for the shows, I've been using house paint.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
House paint.
Using Rust-Oleum
Like
automotive primer.
Rust-Oleum.
Some of it's Bear. Some of it's been, I think it's, Benjamin Moore. And I'm really surprised because like the light cruiser, that model was 5 feet long. And I painted that with an interior flat. But I'm like, this stuff's supposed to be good for 15 years. Good enough for this. But what was fascinating was we were doing this shot of it where it comes right by camera, cruises by. And there is this glint that tracks all the way down the side of it, this bright, hot little glint. And I thought, God, that's amazing. That is flat paint. But it looked amazing. It has such great scale to it. And I'm like, wow, house paint worked pretty good. So, plus you can get it in endless quantities and you get whatever color you want. And so that's what I've been using of late.
And they'll mix it up for you too.
Oh yeah. Well, I go in with the color. I go with the color. I go with a color reader, and I'll pull a color and go, it's Sherwin-Williams 764 or whatever it is, and then mix it. So, yeah.
I say we start building all our models with Sherwin-Williams too, John. What do you think?
Yeah,
Sears weather beater. Sears weather
How does that
beater.
work?
Guaranteed.
How does that work? How does that work in your airbrush? Like, does it thin it out pretty good? Works fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So far,
I would assume it's very smooth because it's just like those if someone's doing home painting, they wear the backpack with the large sprayer.
Oh,
It's just smaller scale, basically. Yeah.
you just have to thin it out enough so it'll go through the brush. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Speaking of that light cruiser, that was just a phenomenal model, John. That was jaw.
I don't know how we got it done. When I saw it at Celebration at Anaheim, I looked at it and I thought, I don't know how that happened, because that was during the pandemic. And I mean, I'm just here for, I don't know, a year and a half or what it was. And I was working on that thing, and there were plenty of days where it was pretty hard to get motivated, because it's like, well, I don't know what the hell's going to happen. Is the world going to end? Who knows? But
did you do the majority of that by yourself, John?
Dan Dan Petrescu, he made the armature, and then he built the back part of the engines, and he did 3D prints for like the guns. See those gray boxes that are up there on the side?
These here?
Yeah, right there. Those are 3D prints. The 3D prints scattered around on it, but a lot of it's scratch built. I'd say 85% of it's scratch built. But
Yeah, John, if I remember correctly, you were saying that you had just used a bunch of random kits you had collected over however many decades. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Fawn Davis closed his shop up here a few years back, and he gave me bankers boxes just full of parts trees. And so there's random stuff. I don't know what the hell it is. It's just, parts that look good. So I'd sit there and go through those boxes, and I'd make these tape strips, and I would find left and right pairs and just glue all the left and rights down. And get as much of that as I can get together for the symmetrical stuff, and then random stuff for the side details. But like that bridge, that was a pain in the ass to make by hand. To understand the printout and then actually make that. And it was interesting too, because the interior, in the past when we did these, we usually just made the windows glow, and we were a couple of weeks away from when we were going to shoot, and John Knoll said, "I think we're going to need an interior in there," and I'm like, what am I going to do for that? But I left the bridge wings left and right on the back. There's a door that snaps in and out. It's a snap fit. And it's about 5/8 of an inch tall, maybe 1.1 wide. And so I took some 1/2 inch acrylic and a Dremel tool, and I just carved out these shapes of like consoles and stuff like that. And then I carved out an area for a 5mm LED. So I made a centerpiece and 2 outboard pieces, and then routed LEDs up into it. And then I just painted the acrylic silver, and then painted the black and scratched it off and used Sharpie to add some color to it. And it looks really interesting when you see it. You don't know what it is. It looks complicated, but it's total bullshit. But it works. It does what it's supposed to do.
And here we are.
It looks like a tight space too.
And here we are trying to get every detail like perfect, exactly the way it should be, and then you're just dremeling scratches on acrylic.
Yeah, well, I mean,
it's crazy.
That's the difference. That's the difference between doing it for yourself as a hobby, and then having to meet the needs of the production within the time frame.
Yes, I like these sides here. They remind me of they're obviously reminiscent of Falcon.
Yeah, they look Falcon. Yeah.
Dan 3D printed those, and he 3D printed that door-like thing that's forward.
Yeah, this here.
That gadget right there. Yeah. So, but yeah, those definitely.
Now, John, when you say 3D printed, what particular materials are you using in the studio for 3D prints?
That's Dan's stuff, and I think he's using a Form Z.
Okay.
If that's correct. And the acrylic, the material, I don't know what it is. It's gray, and it's very high resolution, but it is really brittle.
Oh, so it is brittle. Yeah, that was my question. I'm actually working on this particular ship now. It's not anywhere near as detailed as this, but it's a 3D print that somebody had done and somebody had sent over. And I got to say, I was having the darnest time trying to get certain things to work, and just even taking a Dremel to it, just everything was kind of shattering like glass. And
exactly.
So I didn't know if there was a different type of
No, and that's one of the problems too. Is it's really hard to work with, and the Razor Crest. Now Landis Fields printed that, and I think that was also on an early Form Z, but it was fairly low resolution, so there were a lot of build lines in it, and it was printed at all different angles, so these things had lines going all over the place. It was like 52 individual pieces, and they were like, the expectation I think was that we could just glue the 3D print together and shoot that, and I'm like, hey, there's no way in hell that's gonna work. Because you got to have mount doors. You got to cut out mount doors. They got to fit exactly. You try and cut the mount door out of the thing, the part explodes. I'm like, this just doesn't work. So I'm going to put it all together and just blasting with sandable primer and sanding and going back and forth till I got the build lines out. Because it was going to be skinned in aluminum. All those build lines are going to telegraph that they were there. So once I got it to the point where it looked decent, it was fairly smooth, made a big 2-part mold of it, then recast it with epoxy fiberglass. Then I cut out my mount doors and everything else and kick it across the room now.
Yeah.
Oh, so you cast it after you got it ready.
Yeah.
Because I was gonna say, even for hero shots, how does that work? But that process makes a lot more sense. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. The Skeleton cruise ship, no 3D prints. It's all handmade.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which is a lot more forgiving as well, right? If you need to make repairs, if something gets damaged during shooting and things like that.
Well, that one's pretty forgiving.
Yeah.
Does the 3D print like start sagging or melting when you have it under lights?
I've never we don't build anything big enough to see it do anything like that, but I've seen plenty of study models and that sort of thing that just sit there and just sag, and that's just normal gravity, normal conditions, and it just doesn't hold up that well. So yeah.
So John, you prefer to go back over a wooden frame with styrene and use original styrene parts if that was your go-to option?
Aluminum frame, Hexel preferably, and then beef it up where you need to for the mount rods and that sort of thing. So, but the materials you're working with, you prefer to work with styrene and the original kit. Yeah, styrene kit parts. If I can get them, acrylic sometimes. And then castings, urethane castings. Some epoxy putty. I use a lot more of that than I used to use. So,
what is your favorite ship you've built?
Wow,
do you have one?
That's there's a lot of things to consider. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah, I really like the Skeleton Crew ship, and that's mainly because probably the most recent one. That's a new build, but I like them all. I mean, like I said, they're kind of like children. Are
you involved in Acolyte at all?
No.
Okay.
Nope. So far, Skeleton Crew is the last thing we've done, and right now, they've talked about some more stuff potentially, but haven't heard anything yet.
And the Skeleton
Crew,
it's
lovely that they're using the miniatures again. And you can tell when you see the miniatures on screen, it just feels nicer. It feels homely in how you remember it. The original village used to be.
It's interesting to watch though what they're doing, because they used to take the models and they would scan them, and now they call it scanning. They take several thousand images, and they're using an AI software to stitch all this stuff together and make a 3D model. And John Knoll was saying, he said, we shoot the physical model, it tends to look better than the digital. And then he goes, I beat them until I can't tell them apart. Well, your crew must just love you. So,
what was it like, John, with making the switch from model making in-house to CGI in the early 90s? How did you feel when that bombshell sort of fell, when your whole career changed and now you're sort of revisiting it in a way? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it's the whole thing's been really interesting to me, because I started off in photochemical practical, transitioned into digital, and then went back into at least the practical miniatures, and then the same shooting processes without film. So it's been an interesting thing to kind of go to see it all change from photochemical practical into all this digital stuff, and then to go back and kind of step back in time doing what we were doing 15, 20 years ago. So, but the transition to computer graphics, I didn't do email really. So we got a month's worth of training, and what I was doing digital paint. So I wasn't really modeling. I do modeling a little bit on occasion, but mostly it was paint. And I dreamt and pulled down menus for about 6 months. I mean, it was overwhelming trying to keep up with it all. And it seems so complicated. And, within a couple of years, the software was changing again, sort of relearning the process. And over time, the last thing I worked in was Mari. And that was a really different approach to it. Because instead of mapping photographs onto it or painting in Photoshop and applying that to the model, in Mari, you actually applied materials. And so you paint the whole model white and say, that's a layer of brushed aluminum. And then I create another layer, and I'll say they call it clay. I'll rename it primer, paint the whole thing with a layer of that over the brushed aluminum. And then like a medium gloss car paint, put that over the top of that. So as long as you paint it white, it becomes that material. So now I can go back on that car paint layer, and I can take black and paint it onto that, and those scratches will reveal that primer layer. You could go back and you could go through that primer layer down to the metal. So it was better than working on a real model. I mean, it was really, the level of control you had was phenomenal.
And the
results. Yeah, I mean, I painted the U-wing and the Y-wing on Rogue One, and I had a blast because on the Y-wing there were the copper pipes that are on the back, and I actually put solder joints in there with discoloration. I mean, I had a field day with that. It was amazing. So and then there were times, when I got more comfortable with the tool set, then it becomes just that. It's a tool set. You're making the same aesthetic choices, so your tool set's changed into something different. But, and then I got frustrated with doing practical because it was a hell of a lot easier to fix stuff or mirror it in digital. So
plus the size, right? So if you're doing practical and you're working on something very small, visually you're not able to zoom in and get that, finer detail that you could when that's interesting, making that transition, because most people, not most, but I would assume some people would him and haw find that a challenge, because you're teaching an old dog new trick, so to speak, but then you get used to this new tool and then you're kind of going back again, which isn't a bad thing, but you're right, you're kind of losing some of those elements that you got used to. So it's just interesting to hear from a first-hand perspective.
Yeah, well, it's all about transition.
Yeah.
Plus, it's a lot easier to fix something that you messed up.
Yeah, well, yeah, a lot easier. Yeah, not trying to paint white over black or something like that, or But it was funny. I talked to a 10th grade class a while back, and I said, you're going to grow up in a world where you're probably going to use computers, and every so often the computers will get updated, maybe every 5-6 years. You get new computers. But I said 2 or 3 times between new computers, your software is going to change, and you have to relearn your job. And you're going to be on this sort of technology treadmill for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of digital,
Yeah.
It's like it keeps, I love when they put out the new release. It's like, well, the new release is basically a paint job, because the button that said start over here now says go, and it's over here. It's the same thing, but there's a lot of that crap where I'm like, they're selling their software, and it's kind of a scam, I thought. I mean, they're definitely
especially when you get used to like shorthand keys or shortcut things like that.
Yeah.
The things that you use regularly. Yeah,
and then they change it all. It's like, what was the point of that?
You just got to go 2 more menus in to do the same thing. Yeah. I always find that stuff interesting, because even with the practical effects guys, the stop motion guys, everybody seems to had made that transition, right? And a lot of them did so graciously, maybe with a little bit of resistance. But I always wonder, we haven't talked to many people that haven't made that transition, or became so like resentful of it, or just found it too challenging to actually do so. So it is interesting that people are able to carry that skill set over.
Yeah, well, I mean, the aesthetic is still the same. That's one of the things we always talked about was, people develop an eye. And it was funny, when I got in the model shop, I thought I knew how to paint models. I did not know how to paint models, and especially didn't know how to paint them for film. But it was so interesting being with that group of people. It sort of homogenized us, because you learn from everybody around you, and you kind of learn what looks right. And there's that whole thing about, soft focus your eye and look at it. Is there enough detail? Is there enough contrast there? And you learn how to do that. And it's really interesting how it kind of cross-pollinates throughout the whole group, that we all learn what that look is, what we're after.
Yeah.
So.
That's really interesting. We try and, as best we can, replicate the ILM paint look as much as we can. But you said, were you taught by your peers when you went into, at the model shop, you said you weren't sort of immediately afraid with it, or you thought you knew how to paint. And how long did it take for them to sort of, I think what I'm getting at is them sort of like just pushing your airbrush away and then saying, this is how you do it.
Nobody ever did anything like that, but you just watched everybody,
right.
And you got a sense of what they were doing, and so, because I don't think anybody wants to go, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, everybody, nobody wants to be that guy. So, but you watched everybody. And one of the nice things too, and I found this to be true in the computer graphics department and the model shop, was that people would help you. People were not protective of their secrets. You wanted to learn how to do something, somebody would show you. And I always kind of have this imaginary, you've got this like satchel under your arm, and every time somebody gives you one of those things, you put it in your satchel, it's another tool you got. And man, you learn so much working in the model shop. And different shows, it was a different look, or going for something different. Maybe this show's got more organic stuff. Maybe this is Transformers. It was constant learning, and I always thought it was really interesting that there was always something. I always called it the hook. Every show had something that was the hook that was interesting. So no matter what it was, I'm sure there's something in there, and there would be. That was.
Give us an example of that. Give us an example.
Oh, well, gosh, I'm thinking about Transformers. I just remember my transmission, my truck disintegrated essentially, and the guy called me up, and I thought I had a bad wheel bearing, which I did. But the guy calls me up that night, and he goes, "Hey man, your transmission's over here in the pan." I'm like, "Really?" So I went over to look at it the next day, and there's the front end of the transmission with the planetary gears, and there are chunks out of all four of them. There are pieces gone all over the place, and I was like, "Can I have this?" And he was like, "Yeah." So I took it back to work, and we used this reference for Transformers, just because it was such a great example of what this broken machinery looked like. But it was, movie might have Navy ships in it, something I'd find interesting, or there would be something to focus on that you wanted to learn more about. Okay. And this was this thing when I was in design school. I remember they gave us one of the projects was a bar of soap. I'm like, who the hell wants to draw a bar of soap? For the next 4 weeks, we're going to do a bar of soap. Well, then you realize, when you start looking at bars of soap, and you realize how many different kinds of soap there are. Yeah. And indeed, there's every kind of shape, color, texture. You start realizing all this stuff you've never ever seen before. And so this is the same kind of thing where there's stuff you look at. And that's all part of being an artist too, is trying to look at these things and try and take in all those variants to it. We did doorknobs once. Same thing. It's like, holy crap. Once you open up your eyes to doorknobs, you realize they're different everywhere.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah. The awareness,
So,
right? You take for granted a bar of soap, but then it really makes you self-aware, like you said. Yeah. So the thing I always found, I didn't mean to interject like that, but continue on that direction. The thing that I find interesting, did you ever find it a challenge? So let's say you're working on let's say Star Wars, right? And then you go to Star Trek or Transformers. It's a complete different aesthetic. You tend to get, as a creative, you get in the zone, right? You're in the zone and you're painting a specific way or style, and then you have to now shift or change that. You ever find that to be a little bit challenging, or find yourself kind of using one style and having to?
Well, it's interesting because, doing Star Trek, because I did the paint with Ron Woodall on the Enterprise on the first JJ Star Trek movie. It's funny because what I was going for was kind of the motion picture look, and I got as close as they would let me. They wouldn't let me put a red stripe down the nacelle, but other than that, I kind of got what I wanted. But you're doing different. I had to detail, like at the fantail outside the shuttle bay. I had to detail that. I had to detail right outside the bridge window because it's shot right outside the window. And there's a look that Star Trek kind of has, and then Transformers is this whole other thing, and it's much more mechanical. And my favorite resource for the Transformers movies was the Reno Air Race, and I'd go up there in the pit, and a lot of contemporary military aircraft were the best for the kind of the wear and tear and discoloration and that sort of thing, because you could literally take the photographs and map them onto stuff. But I remember I was working. I do work with the Battleship Iowa, which is in Southern California, and we were out in one of the mothball fleets getting parts, and there was a ramp. And it's just a piece of steel, and it's flat on top, and it's angled on either side. It's for the forklift to drive over the cables without cutting the electrical cables. And we're moving stuff, and all of a sudden, everybody stop. And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "I got to take a picture of this." And they're like, "What?" And I said, "I got to get these scratches, So I photographed the scratches on this piece of steel. That set of scratches is on everything that I worked on probably in the last 6 or 7 years I was at ILM. It's like, well, and on Unbroken, there are B-24 crashes. It's all over the B-24. Transformers, it's all over those. It was all over anything that got distressed had that set of scratches on it. So, yeah, there were things that, that was my favorite scratch pattern.
Yeah.
But
so you just layered it over top of it digitally.
You could take it, and what I did was I took everything out except the scratches, and so I just had this transparent layer, and then you could convert it to black or white, whatever you wanted to do, and in that Mario program, put it right on top of it, and suddenly you got scratches through your undercoat. So
that's so interesting. So like when you look at, let's say, music production, sound design, you'll have some bands that if you pay close attention, there's that certain snare or 3-part drum that they like, and they use it in almost every song, but you don't necessarily notice it until it's pointed out to you. So it's one of those things now. I bet if somebody goes back and watches, you can start to see those similarities now that it's pointed out. You kind of, so that's great. That once you find something, it becomes like a go-to. That's
Well, you kind of have your bag of tricks. You get new stuff too. Used to go to the air races every year, get more images and stuff like that, or random things like on the ships. There's a lot of stuff I found on the ships that was really useful. So,
nothing beats real than real, does it?
Yeah, well, I was teaching a model class for Lucas. I think it was for LucasArts, and the Battleship Iowa was up in Northern California at that point. It was there for about 8 months before it moved down south. And I said, you guys all need to come over and come on the battleship, because this is as close as you'll ever get to a Star Destroyer. This is the real thing. And come and see what this looks like. So
that's what I was doing the other day, John. I was sending you pictures of the inside of an old 1970s coal power plant. I felt like I was walking around inside of a sandcrawler. Like, I took pictures just so I could copy some of the pipe work and some of the different boilers and stuff. And I actually remember, John, I sent you those pictures, remember?
Yeah. Well, and then when you said about pipes and that, I mean, when you're greebling something up and putting the parts on, and you need to make it look like it's functional, right? You need to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's that whole mechanical language thing, and it was interesting because teaching the class, we gave everybody some kits, and we said, try this out, and do your version of kit bashing. And it was really apparent some people got right off the bat. A lot of people just glued stuff on that really made no coherent sense.
Yeah.
And you're trying to convey a mechanical functionality. And it was funny because there was something, it was one of the articles about Ahsoka, and it was talking about, it said Coley Wirtz and I were co-designing the ship. We weren't. Coley was designing the ship. But it was the cargo ships they had in Rogue One. They kind of looked like a big sea turtle. The fins would go vertical when they were landing. And Coley and I were talking about it, and he was saying, "Oh, what do you think? What do you think the top should look like?" And I said, "Well, I'd put some kind of a rack system on top of it, because it's a cargo vessel. You got this big flat deck. You'd want to put something up there that makes sense. So maybe you've got like a rail system, and maybe the idea is that containers could be put on this thing and locked down, but you double your capacity." And I said, you can do something like that, and you don't have to explain it at all. If it makes sense, that will telegraph through. Nobody else has to know what it is or how it works. But if it makes sense, they'll pick up on it. And I think that's true. And I think, you look at the way that the details are put on the sides of the Millennium Falcon, where there's a detail band on the back of the X-Wing right behind the R2 unit.
Yeah.
It's done thoughtfully in such a way that it actually looks like it has a function to it.
Yeah, that's an art form in itself.
Yeah, it really is. And you go back, and if you look at Star Crash, and Star Crash is available on Netflix right now under the Mystery Science Theater 3000 banner, which is perfectly appropriate for it. But there they just made these shapes, and it literally looks like they put glue on them and they rolled them through some kit parts.
No, really?
There's no real thought to it or anything. It's just this jumble of stuff. And they were trying to mimic Star Wars. It was right on top of Star Wars. So they were trying to mimic Star Wars, but without any of the finesse or the detail or any of the stuff that made Star Wars really work. Because Star Wars, Jerry Anderson did the things like Thunderbirds, and he did Far Side of the Sun, and he did UFO and Space 1999. But the early stuff that he did with Derek Meddings, and Derek Meddings was famous for working on the Bond films, doing miniatures. But Jerry Anderson, it was the first place I really saw a lot of kind of kit parts and weathering. There's some of it in 2001. It's interesting because the Ares that's the only surviving miniature from 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I worked with some folks, and we refurbished it for the Academy Museum. And it's interesting because it has a handful of kit parts on it that are on the upper body. It's got a lot of kit parts on the engines, but there's all this oil that's leaking out of it everywhere. And I'm like, we were working on it. I'm like, you know what? I wouldn't get in this damn thing if it was real. There's no way. But it's done to sell it that it functions. But you look at it like, you turn this thing out and just blow up. I mean, it's just leaking stuff everywhere. But it's cinematically, it reads and it sells it as being real. It was funny when we did the first Transformers. The initial direction was to make the robots clean. They didn't have any weathering on them. And we did that, and we did the first renders. It was like, oh, good Lord, they look like these totally artificial big plastic things.
Yeah.
And then the word came down, no, weather them up, beat them up, scratch them up, beat them, so we beat them all to pieces. And then that sells it. It makes all the difference in terms of seeing your real
makes
or
it
not.
real world. Makes it more real world. Yeah.
Well, and that was the beauty of being able to take photographs of stuff and actually pull in those real world elements and map them onto the models. You really got that believability with it.
I find it difficult sometimes when I'm like right now, John and I are both doing this concept AT that Joe Johnson had drew up, and trying to get your machinery to look like it functions is a pretty hard thing to do sometimes, especially when you're trying to go through 100 kit boxes to try to find something that would work in this little spot and doesn't look completely out of place. And it's fun, but it's a lot harder than most people think it is.
It is. And then finding multiples of the same kit if you're not recasting the part to replicate it. And funny, me and Chris, we have literally not been talking about this. We have been on our desks with vintage kits open, and we've been pilfering these models, and we've come up with the same kit parts in the same areas. It's funny how your mind works.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, there's some of those kits. They're those go-to kits too. They're like the rail guns. Yeah. And I've been buying the 88 millimeter, that small gun. A lot of good stuff in there. Yeah, but a lot of those kits, they're phenomenal. They're such a great source. They are. It gives you instant credibility.
8-Rad, Harrier, they're all really go-to kits that are on just about everything. But because they're on everything because they have such cool, functional looking pieces that aren't like a battery or transmission pan or what I mean. So they work great.
It's funny.
Sorry, John, go on.
Oh, just the Sandcrawler. It's really interesting to me the use of the Saturn V kit in the back end of the Sandcrawler. Mm-hmm. I mean, they made maximum use out of just about every piece back there.
Yes,
but it's
they
interesting how it's reconfigured, turned, and cut, and everything else. But it's really amazing what they did.
Yeah, I'm building one right now from Kit Parts. It's really? I got the top back done, and the middle top done, and I'm about to start the back, but I'm waiting for a little bit till I finish something else. But
you and I need to talk.
Yeah, we can talk. Are you doing one too?
I've been picking at it for a long time.
Okay. All right.
But
listen, you can join our little group builds. We have group builds that we just go on. The three of us and four of us actually. Marvin, another guy who hangs with us a lot. His name's Marvin. He's a very smart guy. We jump online and we just start building together because it helps to figure things out when your mind sees something that you can't figure. It's good to get another person's perspective to give you another set of eyes to it.
Yeah. Well, kind of like what you were saying earlier, John. Like when you're in that environment and you start picking up, those sort of habits and skill sets of other people, and you start bringing that into your tool set. So putting a fresh perspective, fresh set of eyes, or just learning oh, this is how John's doing it. Maybe I should try that approach. Or this. I think it's a great way of going about it.
We sat and made the walkway, didn't we, Chris? The Sandcrawler walkway. We sat on a video conversation like we are now, and Chris is saying, "John, stop! Don't put that there. That could be a bit more." And we've and the same with the Slave One. We've made so much progress by banging heads together on the screen than if we would have done privately on our own.
Yeah, well, three heads is better than one.
That is true.
Yeah.
John, you is it okay to mention you're repairing some of the original models at the moment? Is that still something you're working on?
I don't know how well that's known, or I don't know that I can comment on that.
Okay. Sorry. Maybe I should have asked you privately about that.
It's okay, it's all right.
Privately.
Yeah. Well, another thing I wanted to ask you is
welcome to join our little group builds anytime you feel like it.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you coordinate the time?
Oh,
Well, I
that
usually ring
usually
Chris
works out.
when
Like
he's
I usually
waking up
jump on in the morning.
before breakfast.
Yeah, when I'm waking up, he's already. I can't tell you how many phone calls I've gotten at 7 a.m. because he's 5 hours ahead of me. You know, my wife's like, "Is that John again?" And he forgot again. So
Do you guys know Wayne Minnie?
No.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, he just did a 4-foot Enterprise D for the Sci-Fi Museum it's in England somewhere.
Okay.
And
I don't know Wayne, but I think I saw images of that.
yeah, he posted a bunch of stuff online about it, and you know it's funny because he was doing that at the same time. I had the 4-foot D from Next Generation, which had fallen on some pretty hard times, and it got shipped to me about 3 or 4 years ago, and it looked so bad. I would just look at it and be like, it just made me feel bad. I didn't know where to start, and finally they actually needed the model, so I started working on it in earnest. And Wayne was working on this set. It was a set of castings of the same model, of Greg Jean's model. So Wayne was working on it, and we would talk almost every night between 2 and 3 in the morning my time, because that was when I'd be ending my day, and we're comparing notes, and we're trading parts back and forth. He had some of it, I had some of it, you know, and both of ours are done now. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. Every night going, so what about the deflector dish? Okay, I can send you a casting next Tuesday.
Yeah, sometimes it's pretty sad actually that it'll be late at night and then you'll finally find a piece that you're looking for and you can't sleep and you're saying, I found the ID.
when we were doing the 2001 model, there was a part and it was on the left engine on screen, and it was a round disc that was about an inch and an eighth. And you could see it on screen, but you couldn't tell much about it. And we had really good imagery for a lot of that model, but we were missing about a 10-inch section of it. And so that was in our 10-inch section. And I was looking at a book. There were 2 books written by Adam Johnson called The Lost Science of 2001. There was a red book and a blue book. And in the red book, I think on page 28, there was a picture of the Ares about the size of a softball. And you could see the part. But because of print resolution, you couldn't make it out.
Oh,
so I was like, so I tried to find Adam through the publisher, couldn't find that. But then I found AJK Models, which was a 2001 garage kit company. I'm like, that's got to be him. So I wrote him, and like within an hour, he's like, I was wondering when you were going to call. I'm like, okay. So we started talking about it, and he was going to get us the images of that because they were the clean images without the print resolution issue. But before we actually got that stuff, I woke up at like 2 in the morning. I woke up one night and I was thinking about that part, and we had one view of it from underneath. There was a shot directly under the Ares, and you could see it was kind of a dome in these little tabs. Okay, so I took out all of the kits I had accumulated for the Ares. I got a bookcase. It's just Ares kits. Took them all out. Took one of each down on the coffee table. Took all the parts out. Went through the whole thing. It was none of those. So then I got online and I went to eBay UK and I put in vintage model kit. And on page 52, it showed up. And I should have known. I missed the clue. The clue was that there was a terracotta red in the glue that was left on the model. And that should have been a hint. And what I got confused with was there was an Airfix B29 kit that had a pressure bulkhead in it. That pressure bulkhead was used at all the connecting points for the landing gear. So there were 16 of those on the lower part of the model, and there's one up in the top of it. And it was the right size. And I'm like, but that was cast in white or gray. So I should have known then that wasn't it. But when I saw page 52 on eBay, I realized, I was like, oh shit, there it is. It's called a Pressman dual silo train car. It's also on the Moon Bus. And it's a little Airfix HO scale train car kit. And it's the cap. It's got 2 of these caps, and that was the part. And I knew as soon as I saw it, I'm like, that's it. So about 4:30, I got to go back to bed, So I solved
on page 52. That's the best part.
Yeah, page 52. I remember it all very clearly because it was one of those stress things where you wake up in the middle of the night, can't sleep anymore. It's like, I got to go figure this out.
But what a great feeling when you find that ID and you've got it.
Yeah. And I had one.
Oh, wow.
Because I was setting aside parts to build a moon bus. And as soon as I saw it, I'm like, I went and got it out of the closet. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's it.
Oh, fantastic.
So,
yeah, quite often, 9 times out of 10, the model is on there anyway in a different form. They've used the same kit,
Yeah. So, yeah, that's the interesting thing. But, I don't know how many kits are on the Sandcrawler, like 75. You know,
Oh, there's 12 Panther Gs. They're Bandai Panther Gs, and they're £200, $200 to find a
It's
single
really
one.
messing
Oh
with
my
my Wi-Fi.
God.
Jump on the other Wi-Fi
Wow.
because it's really
Well, the
messing
problem
with
with
me.
the problem with the Panther Gs now, John, is it's not even the price; it's trying to find them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even if you have the money to buy them, they're just not as accessible or as available as they used to be.
Yeah.
No. And
I've been able to
I mean,
find 11
we
of them.
get away with the Jag Ds somewhat, but
No.
when Chris has learned lately that you end up just buying more Panther Gs anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need exactly 11 Panther Gs just for one specific little engine part that you have to have. I've been able to find 11 of them. What is it? 12 you need, right?
12 you need, yeah.
Yeah. It just takes
you-
time.
You can't. You couldn't mold it, cast them.
Chris is very fussy about what he puts on his models, and he likes to
Yes.
stick to styrene.
I like to
I'm
stick to
okay with
styrene.
casts.
I do
too,
have
but
a-
at a certain point.
I
Well,
do have a
I
3D
see-
print of that. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the
I mean,
thing.
no,
Is I
there's-
see all these people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people that are 3D printing their Greeblies, and I'm like, okay. It's like it's hard to nail down exactly what's the most acceptable thing, the etiquette for this, because some people it's got to be the kit part. Some people it's okay if it's casting. Some people are doing it 3D print and going, they're perfectly fine with it. I'm like, okay, well, I think it's just personal preference what it comes
yeah,
down
I
to.
find that it's specific models that I want to keep.
Yeah.
All styrene, like my Sandcrawler and Slave One. I want them all to be all styrene. I don't want.
That's what I was gonna say. You seem to be more. I don't think that it's not necessarily that you're not open-minded to it. I think it's very specific models because
Yes.
you are open-minded to casting or using 3D pieces, but there are certain models that you just want 100% as accurate as can be. Because there's even been times where I'm like, hey, why don't you try this or why don't you try that? And you're like, yeah, sure. But then when it comes to a certain model, you're like, I'd rather not. I'd rather take the time or invest or, I totally understand that. And I get that, right? Because certain things are a passion project. Other things are like, okay, this is accessible. I just want to get this done. Yeah.
There's a certain
I think
beauty
it's like
in.
Sorry, John. Go.
I was just to say, there's a certain beauty in not building at studio scale and pushing it one way or the other, a little bigger, a little smaller, and just building it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have two different size Sandcrawlers. I have a studio scale size one and half studio scale. So a whole kit, that I built already. I built 4 of them actually, but yeah. So the big one's taking. I just realized I'm on a 1-year anniversary now. Is when I bought that skeleton. So it's been a lot of fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had children since I started mine. So.
Yeah.
Well, these things take time. You need to all live to be about 800 to 1,000 years old to, finish everything.
Yeah. You always take on more than one project as well.
Oh God, yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
But it's been a lot. It's a lot of fun. I'm very glad we're able to meet you and have you on for the show. It's been a blast.
I really appreciate it, and it's fun. It's fun talking to people that are kind of on the same page with this stuff.
Do you find that do you do any modeling at home on your own for your own self?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good.
Whenever I can find the time to do it,
Right.
That's why I said we all need to live to be 800 to 1,000 years old to get everything done.
Yeah.
I realized today, I was telling somebody, I've told the story a couple times lately, but I've got, I think, like 10 submarine models that are all between 8 and 9 feet long.
Okay.
But I realized, so I was telling that story the other day, I actually have 12. And I called Larry 10 up and I said, Larry, I think I'm going out of my mind. I'm like, unless I'm going to open up a submarine museum, what the hell am I doing? He goes, well, it's about joy. And I'm like, okay, good. Because I thought it's about losing my damn mind. Like, what am I doing?
Where are you going to put all those?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And that was funny because, Greg Jean gave me 5 of them. And he gave me a 9-foot I-boat that was a casting of the one from 1941. He gave me 2 9-foot Gatos that were from Virus, then an 8-foot Gato, and then a 32nd parallel Type 7C German U-boat. So
Nice.
that's half of my collection of giant submarines. That and it was interesting. Did any of you know Greg Jean?
No.
Well,
Not
we know
personally.
of him, but we don't
Yeah, no.
personally.
Well, it's funny.
No, he
I met,
gave me
like I
one
said-
of the other boxes with the other X-wing he has. It's in my closet.
Oh, really? Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, like I said, I met Greg in '86, and Greg was a mentor for me the whole time, until he passed away. He passed away about a year and a half ago, not quite a year and a half ago. But it was really interesting, his auction. It was unbelievable, all the stuff he had.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Greg and saying, what do you want to have happen? What do you want to do? And he did not want to talk about it. And I realized after my conversation with Larry, for Greg, it was about joy. It wasn't, he didn't want to deal with the mortality or what to do with it. He just loved having it,
Yeah.
and it left a huge, huge project for his family and friends to deal with. But,
Oh, I can imagine,
I get where he was coming from though. The auction catalog from that is well worth getting if you can get it. It's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I picked up a copy. It's always worth it.
Well,
I already know all this. All this is going to my kids. They all know it already, so they all have things picked out. All this is going to them.
It's
You're
it's
lucky.
It's an interesting thing you brought up, John. Right? It was about Greg saying like at the time, right before his passing, it was something that he just wanted to enjoy. Right? It wasn't about doing one thing or the other. And we've had a few guests and even people that we haven't talked to directly. Like you take somebody like Gus Lopez, right? When you see his collection, and we've actually asked him. It's an odd question, but you have to say, but the question of that magnitude, when you pass, what happens, right? Especially if you don't have children. And these are museum level pieces. Like, so what do you do as a steward of these pieces? And then you take somebody like Adam Savage, if you will, right? Like tested. And you think, you look at his workspace and you say, well, hey man, if anything goes wrong, like who's cleaning this and categorizing it and inventorying it? Like that just hurts my brain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It scares me because that a bunch of us are potentially would be the recipients of dealing with that. And it's funny. I mean, 3210 is closing, and 3210 is the facility where ILM was based in Santa Fe, and it's 2 buildings that were part of ILM.
Yeah, somebody just asked about that.
Oh yeah, gosh, I'll be there tomorrow. I'll be over there tomorrow. I was over there the other day using the lathe, and I'm like, as I'm turning the handle, the auction tag is whipping by. I'm like, this is really kind of hard to use the equipment with them trying to sell it out from underneath us, Yeah, they had to go get the vacuum. I had to undo the cord, untag it, go do the vacuum, and come back, put the cord all back, tag it back up, put it back in the
Wow.
That's funny. Yeah,
vacuum.
it seems to have they seem to have some pretty interesting things in those auctions as well.
Yeah, I mean that sort of. I mean, it was weird. It's weird because ILM left there 15 years ago, thereabouts, and then when Kerner Optical was there, that was an iteration of it. But when 3210 formed, all this stuff came back, and like even the racks for the material in the wood shop came back. I'm like, where the hell was all this stuff, And stage equipment, all kinds of stuff, and it was kind of like ILM had been hiding in the cracks, and it kind of bled back into the building. So it's been really amazing because Sean House has been running the model shop over there, and he kind of reproduced what used to be called Uptown Model Shop, and it's got the original paint racks. I mean, it's just so much of the original stuff that was the ILM model shop, and it's gut wrenching to watch it being sold off like it is.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
I
mean, it's like a fire sale almost.
Well, yeah, they kind of decided about maybe 2 months ago that they were out by October 31st. That was it.
Wow.
And Sean's been trying to find different ways to try and save the facility, and there just isn't anybody with the pockets that can do it. So, and they're gutting the C Theater. The C Theater was where Skywalker Sound did all their initial Foley work, and it's a sound isolated room. It's a beautiful theater. It's a THX theater, and they're going to destroy that space. They're going to gut those buildings, and that's the only stage left in Marin County too. Main stage.
That's history, right? That's cinematic history right there.
It's totally history. So
what are they
going
to
to
do? Make apartments of it? They're going to make
I think
apartments
it's
out of it.
Commercial space. It can be warehouse or office or
Yeah.
whatever. but they just
It'll
wanna
be a
gut it.
Chipotle or a Starbucks. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a damn shame because it's and Sean had organized historic tours there that Lucasfilm licensed, And we
Oh
were
wow.
able to do
Okay.
one of those the day before the lockdown. And that would have been a really interesting thing. I think people
Yeah.
would come from all over that would want to do that. So, yeah, it's really sad to see it go. It was a really good facility, and we did so many things there. And you walk out on the stage, and it's just like, God, I've got memories of 100 different projects in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I have a question for you. Do you ever get to
Yeah.
go to the archives to look at some of the older pieces and, go build things kind of like it or imitate it or something like that?
I go to the archives pretty regularly.
Do you? Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, but
Can you take
and
some
I
pictures for us?
don't think they'll allow that anymore.
Not anymore, no.
Yeah, it's changed hands kind of.
There's a
But,
couple spots on the Sandcrawler and Slave One we need to know about.
Yeah.
What's that model
I-
behind you?
Oh, that was a building from a Charles Barkley versus Godzilla commercial.
Oh, okay.
Oh my god, I remember that. Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know what that dome at the top's from. The helicopters from our first Union commercial. There's a ship back there that's from Next Generation from season 6. There's a bat mirror from Batman Returns, and a Raiders idol. But
Well, I'd like to ask something that I ask people sometimes. The first time you saw your work on screen, I mean, I know it probably never gets old, but what was that first like visceral reaction like?
it's that thing that I built that's not the same one that's on screen. Some magical process happened inside the camera. That's something different. When it appears on screen, that has magically become something else. I remember really having that feeling on Back to the Future 2, looking at stuff and just going, that's just not possible. That's just I still have moments like that. It was funny because we were laying on the couch watching Mandalorian, and ship went by. Anytime you saw it in space, it was the miniature. I said, that is so weird. That came from the garage downstairs. And there it goes zooming through space on TV. I'm like, that's really weird.
Yeah, it's gonna be trippy, right?
Yeah, I don't
Cool.
think I've ever gotten. I don't think you get over that. It's just kind of amazing.
I'm sure you don't. I know I wouldn't.
So I was going to ask you, John. So you build now currently from your own place, is that right? You don't work from a studio?
Well, I was using 3210.
Well,
Like I said, though, they're taking it apart around us while we're trying to do stuff. But so that's that. 3210 was a great space to have because we had a machine shop, we had a full size wood shop, spurry booth. We had all the things we needed, vacuum form machines, and so I would do a certain amount of it there, but mostly I would work out of my own garage. And so there are a handful of us that were at 3210 that are looking for a new space potentially. Okay. So that's all sort of in its gestation at this point. We've set aside a certain amount of the tools and equipment, and we're giving ourselves 6 months to find another location and kind of get set up. So hopefully we'll get something else.
Well, see, there you go, Chris. Even the ILM guys are working in their garage like us.
Well, that's what cracks me up. The Ahsoka press release, it says the ILM model shop, and I'm like, that's kind of stretching it a little bit. It's me in my garage.
But as you were saying that, the first thing that crossed my mind was the accessibility, the utilization of the tools and everything that you don't want to sort of overcrowd your own home space or garage space with is one thing, and working from home is good, but there's got to be times where you miss the element of being able to, like we were saying, we jump on video calls and bounce ideas off each other.
Oh,
but nothing can replace the element of working with and kind of putting heads together and sharing ideas, and that's the tough part.
Well, the ILM model shop, like I said, I got there in '88, and a lot of people had already come and gone. But we, over the the course of time, we acquired new people and stuff, and it was very familial. We all still get together. A bunch of us are going camping this weekend, But it's kind of like I'm as connected to those people. I'm more connected to those people than a good deal of my family.
Yeah.
And there are connections there that for me they're 35 years almost, I think, or maybe it is 35. But that you work together so intensely. And on such cool stuff, and and I just sometimes you're there around the clock, together, and you're just crammed in there doing this stuff. And it was kind of one of those things that if people didn't get along, they didn't tend to last.
Right.
Because it was so intense, and you had to be able to count on the people around you to do their jobs, and know that
High
was gonna
stakes.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
We always say it takes a whole crew to build one model, even just one in your garage. Like the four of us, there's a lot of things I wouldn't have been able to do or think about or figure out on my own. The fact that I had the other guys help me to do that was priceless, So
Yeah,
yours is on a grander scale.
We would get a lot of questions on some of our more casual shows. And as Chris said, like I used to say all the time, quote unquote, it takes a village. It really does. Because even to hone your skills, right? Sometimes when you think, hey, I'm pretty good at this, I get this down. Then you realize somebody else has a different technique or a different way of doing it that may be more efficient or a little bit more cleaner or smoother. And there's so many things that you can continue to take from. And also just everybody has a specialty. Like, you get John with the way he paints and, just all these different elements that you can borrow from and pick from. And that's the thing that I think is sometimes the hardest. But like you said, you're in a situation at times where a lot of these times basically are like the 11th hour, right? Like get it done, get it on screen, get, you as a model maker and as a creative, when you want to just put that extra little detail and clean this up here, like it's got to like go against everything in you because it's like, nope, like get it out, get it on, get it shot. And, that's the tough part. Like you said, it's high stakes. It can get very tense and, hopefully you're with the right people and in the right environment.
Yeah. Well, there's also, there's two different modes. There's that kind of mode. And then when I'm building something for myself, I'll tend to, I'll do those things. And sometimes you wind up having the time to finesse things and add details and stuff like that on some of the film jobs. But so much of the time, we would spend so much time worrying about something. I remember, like on Die Hard 2, we had these big airplane models we had these DC-8s that were 21 feet long. And, Tim Greenwood had spent all this time painting them, and the pirate guys had rigged them and everything. And the first time we went to shoot one of them, we had it drop down on wires, and it was supposed to hit the ground and skid, and the wings were supposed to ignite, and the wings were supposed to come off. And the fuselage was going to skid further down the runway, and then we were going to blow it up with more models progressively. And instead, the first time we did it, it was all loaded with pyro and stuff, and it came down the cables, but they had it attached to a pickup truck, except they didn't attach to the pickup truck. So when they yelled action and the truck took off, the plane didn't do anything for a while. And then eventually the plane came down the wires, and it kind of got to the ground, and it just kind of crunched itself and broke and sat there. And we're like, well, what the hell's that? And they're like, and it's loaded with explosives. It's like, but we had to go out and kind of fix the flaps and the landing because it was all broken from it just crunching it. So we're kind of fixing all that stuff, and the wing got turned. And so we're taking silver gaffer's tape, and we're going around the wing route. We're taking black spray paint, spraying and stuff. And I'm like, we spent all that time making it look perfect. And here's the shot. We could have painted a grocery bag and blown it up, and it would have looked as bad. So there was a lot of that where you just kill yourself on all these details, and then ultimately what winds up on screen, you're like, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I remember on Star Trek 6, we had gotten the Excelsior, and the Excelsior was built for Star Trek 3. And I don't know if it was in 4, I think, briefly. And then it may have been used on the TV shows and whatnot. But, these models weren't built to last forever. So we get it for Star Trek 6, and the mount doors, they're all broken, and the screws are stripped, and it's like it's falling apart. In that model, whenever we do the light pass, we have to go with black tape and put black tape without disturbing the model, put black tape over all these light leaks, so it's just covered in black tape, and then take it all back off without moving anything. But the mount doors were all coming off, and we're cutting a piece of white paper tape, sticking them on it. It looked like crap. There's a shot in Star Trek 6 where it comes right by camera. And that mount door goes by camera. It looks perfect. And I'm like, holy crap. That's that magical process that happens where I'm like, it looked like garbage in person, but on screen it looks perfect. So, I don't quite understand what happened there, but, I knew what it looked like when I see the shot.
That's always interesting. When we show pictures of real models, whether we're going over like auctions or, whatever it may be, or just pulling up reference images, and some of the people that like, whether they're buying, commissioned models or, mass-produced models, and then they see the real thing, and they're like, "Does it really look that bad? Is it really in that bad shape? Are the colors really this grimy?" And it's like, well, yeah, they didn't have 6 months or 9 months to sit and meticulously, detail it. Like, no, they had to get it to where they needed to get it to, and I think it's surprising. You know, it's sometimes jarring because, like you said, or there's that trickery of how you see it on camera. You know, the cleanup and the editing and all that, where you know personally that, like, hey, I put this thing right before it went on camera, how janky and it was on its last leg, and then now it looks like this beautiful piece. And I think it's real interesting, you know, to kind of connecting or disconnecting the two. But I always find that to be you know, surprise. It never fails to surprise me.
Well, it's
John,
funny. I do a.
So have you ever had a home one moment where, you know, like home one, it's painted so intricately and all these different colors and all these different shapes, and they spent so much time on it, and then it's a blink if you miss it? Have you ever had a ship where you just went to town on it and then it barely got shown? You're just like, oh, well, why do I waste all my time on that thing like that?
Oh, there've been plenty of times we built stuff and it never got seen.
Yeah. I guess that'd be worse. Yeah.
So it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of, I remember I was working on the God, what was it with Jim Carrey, The Truman Show, and there was a shot he wanted to go to Fiji, and so they were like, you know, in the story they buy this old airliner and they pick it up with a crane and they bounce it around and they set it down in this Fiji world that's next to Truman World, and that's, you know, that's that thing. So they bought an 8-foot electric RC plane, and I don't know, BAE I think makes the plane. It's a high wing 4-engine. It kind of looks like a C-17, but it's a smaller version that's like for commercial, like 50-seat passenger plane. So they bought a bead foam version of that, and I learned a really painful lesson on that. So I took it and I used spray glue and I put glass cloth down on it, got it all perfect, and I mixed up epoxy and I painted it on there, but the epoxy was just regular viscosity. Well, the epoxy ran and dripped and did all kinds of things. Well, there is no way to sand that back out because the epoxy is harder than the foam underneath. So I wound up putting about 1.5 gallons of Bondo on that thing to build it out so I could smooth it out, because it wound up with an aluminum skin, so it's all got to be pretty clean. Yeah. So built the thing and then built these cradles for it, and I think it was Hanover Airlines, and built the cradles and the crane arm and all that stuff, and they shot the elements. And I go see the movie and I'm like watching it, and at one point Truman runs into this travel agency and there's a poster of a DC-8 or a 707 on the wall being struck by lightning from multiple places, and he kind of goes, and he runs out. That's the only airplane in the movie. The credits are rolling. I'm like, well, what happened to the airplane scene? It's not in there. You can see the footage it's on YouTube somewhere. And then the model of the plane got donated to the Academy, so the Academy Museum has it, and they don't know what to do with it because it was not in the movie. So, And the odd thing is, here's an odd thing. There was the symbol on the side of the plane was Mercury. The god Mercury was his head with his helmet with the wings on it. And for whatever reason, that has been in the door jamb of whatever truck I've had since that show. So it's in my truck outside right now. So kind of interesting. It's with me every day.
Nice.
But yeah, didn't make it in the movie.
I got an interesting question I always wanted to ask, and this is something that always crosses my mind whenever we're talking to somebody, because it's hard to imagine. But if you weren't doing this, right? Like if you weren't doing models, working in movies and whatnot, what would you be doing?
That's a really interesting question, because I was on a path from age 5. You know, this was it. This was all I wanted to do. So I don't know. I mean, I got a friend who does aircraft and helicopters for film, full-size ones, and he's always offered me a job. I'm going to go do that. But I don't know. It's a really good question, because I knew what I wanted to do when I was 55 years ago. I knew what I wanted to do.
That's amazing. A lot of times when people say that, like it's this or bust, like that's it. Yeah. Right. If I hook up my crook, this is what I'm gonna do. 9 out of 10 times, it sounds so cliche, right? But it's true. 9 out of 10 times that's what that person ends up doing. So yeah, that's why it is a difficult question, because it's hard to see yourself not doing that. Yeah.
And it's weird. It's weird watching something like 3210 close, because it's a pretty big door shutting with that going away, because that's the last vestige of that original ILM facility. It's funny. I've got a 10-foot replica of the Luxembourg from Rocketeer that's kind of been in that Kerner complex since I built it 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And we moved it over to ILM 2 weekends ago. So it's
Okay.
now hanging in the stairwell over at ILM. But that was kind of weird, finally taking it out of there.
So
And
it doesn't
thank
get
God-
auctioned off.
Yeah, well, that, and thank God it didn't come
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
There was a place for it to go at ILM.
Do you have a separate collection room where you display your models? No.
No.
Okay. Yeah.
I wish I did.
Yeah.
No, my house is, there are models everywhere, and my garage looks like, somebody said, "What's your garage like?" I'm like, well, imagine a dumpster that's kind of like Swiss cheese. There are holes in it where you can kind of go through it, but it's just full of stuff. There's stuff everywhere.
Oh, it's
So-
easy to get completely messy. At my workshop, I have it. I end up working on a space maybe this big after I'm like
so do I.
sitting stuff.
So do
I have to take every half hour and just clean it all up, and then 5 minutes later, I get back to this again. You know.
Yeah,
No,
we
I
have
was-
tables and tables of space, but then it encloses around you, and you look up, and you've just got boxes around you.
Yep.
Yeah, it was funny.
Yeah.
I built it's about a 3.5 foot lunar module. And I started looking around like, how the hell did I make this in here? There's nowhere to make it, I'm like, because I'm working on the same thing. It's like the desk space is like the size of a shoe. That's the amount of surface I've got to work on still. It's like, and Steve Golly was over here, and he was standing in the garage, and he said, "Where'd you build that Star Destroyer?" I'm like, "Where you're standing." He goes, "No, but where'd you build it?" I'm like, "Right where you're standing. This is it, Steve. This is it. This is all the space there is."
Yeah.
Fucking and dodging.
Well, this is a pretty good place for us to stop. I think. I'd love to actually talk out off camera with you about a bunch of stuff if you have time.
Sure.
Yeah. I think this is a good place. So I want to thank you, John, so much for joining us. This was great.
Oh yeah,
I
my
would
pleasure. And John, thanks for being up so early.
No, anytime.
Yeah. We'd love to have you
guys
back,
being
John.
up late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure John will get up again if you jump on. So yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I'd
absolutely.
love to.
And I can call and wake him up early in the morning for once this time. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
but yeah, this has been great. This has been a lot of fun, and we will definitely have to do this again. But don't go anywhere. Don't hang up. And don't push
Okay.
anything. We'll keep talking.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thanks
Thanks
you,
for having me.
everybody. Thanks for
Cheers,
joining.
guys.
See ya.